Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Please let me know if you can't see my screen. Why I had problems with screen sharing today. Okay, so hang on. Did I press record? 1 second. Yes, it is. Okay. All right. So traumatic brain injury. So this is, I find traumatic brain injury being one of the most fascinating disorders we work with. And just like we say with autism, we say with traumatic brain injuries, no two are alike. So definitely, there's some generalities, some things we know to expect, but again, I've had the opportunity to work with adults with traumatic brain injury, but the younger clientele that have experienced brain injuries, there's such, their neuroplasticity is just so different. So definitely, I find it fascinating. I think it's, if I dare say, it's a fun disorder to treat. It's challenging. I don't know if fun is the right word, but I find them interesting, and we can support them quite a bit. So, all right, so let's look at some of our read and review. So concussion, I will say now, um, just the awareness about concussions, I think, has improved so much than when I first started in the field. So as a speech pathologist, we learn what that can do. And I am thrilled to see the awareness, the people, the athletes have to go through the concussion, the trainers, the coaches use concussion protocols now. So super, super better intervention right away in getting those identified and getting them the right support, not after their third or fourth concussion. So the biggest challenge I see for some of our high risk groups, athletes, young and old, being some of our biggest areas, our biggest targeted groups that were at risk. Um, the challenge is making sure the person reports it, or you might take a bad hit on the football, but not wanting to say, you wake, stand up, you're fine, you're okay. So that is dangerous. So that's my concern with my high schoolers at my high school. So this is a good little handout. And obviously, if you don't know the symptoms of concussion, please, familiarize yourself. So definitely what we see. So let's say you're with somebody. This has happened. I mean, this happens in a skilled nursing facility. So say you're working rehab with somebody, let's say they've been through a car accident, they're doing physical therapy, they're doing the things that, they were told they got to get up and walk, that kind of thing. And what my concern is always is that they just suffered a head injury and then they're up walking, maybe taking risks that they shouldn't, or they don't have the nursing assistant who's supposed to come there and help them get to the bathroom, that kind of stuff, and then fall and then now experience, symptoms of a concussion. Or you're doing your average rehab, they're there, recovery from a hip surgery, knee surgery, so they weren't there from some kind of car accident, that kind of thing, and then they fall and then have a concussion. So I have seen that happen. So being aware of what are the signs, what are some things we need to be cautious of. So obviously balance problems, nausea, vomiting, numbness or tingling. Anytime somebody reports that could be a 911 call. The sensitivity to light, and then slurred speech. So those are some, blaring, alarms. So be aware. I will say that the other key piece of awareness that I do in just general for general safety is work on the importance of helmets. So when you work with people who ride bikes, skating, ski board, sledding, skiing, um, definitely can be, you know, at risk for some injuries. So I like this handout. I think it's a good, nice summary. Hold on. Oh, one second. Oh, on this one, somebody was asking. So I like this. So like I've told you guys numerous times, I like some of the short things, and there's some good articles. Yeah, like acute treatment. Of course, there's a lot of ads on these. So if you look through here, especially if you want to know some more specific information, this has some good blogs and what do you think one is it? So some other things that you know, car accident, TBI, that kind of thing, brain injury from birth. So I do like this resource. Someone was asking particularly, and you know, I just like how they explain some of this, especially kind of the difference between a car accident, TBI, versus something like cerebral palsy and how it affects your nervous system. So there's some great information in the blog on this particular website. So let me go back. Oh, can you not see that? Did you see that? Hold on, where's my chat? Hopefully. Okay, hold on. Sometimes when you have to stop the share.
Oh, can you hear me?
Get it. So on this one, it's the traumaticbraininjury.com. The articles, there's some really good, and they're really short with some very specific information. So I like that. When in doubt, oh, darn it, it did move. 1 second. I'll fix that link. There we go. It's supposed to link to this page. Everybody see it? Traumatic brain injury.
Yes, we see it.
So there's going through the signs and symptoms. So usually we know if somebody has had a traumatic brain injury, and definitely kind of there's open and closed head injuries. So looking at kind of what are some signs and symptoms. So the physical problems, definitely those would be noticeable, but then also other things too, like some of the sensory problems. So the sensitivity to the lights, the ringing in the ears, changes in vision or double vision. So anybody reports double vision, be sure to, you know, encourage them to speak to their doctor. You're in a healthcare facility, definitely somebody reports that, be sure to alert the doctor so they're aware of some of these things. So behavioral changes, we see this a lot. So especially in our adult population that has encountered a traumatic brain injury, a lot of times we see kind of that personality and behavior changes. And then thinking, so difficulty paying attention. This can sometimes look like other disorders too. So remembering and learning new information, difficulty planning, difficulty in like problem solving, simple, you know, simple things that they have to do each day. So that sequencing piece. So speech and language problems, a lot of times we see things related to their actual speech production. So dysarthria. And then, you know, that comprehension piece. And then social communication. So a lot of times too, we see their inability to self-regulate. So we'll see social communication, so difficulty taking turns, interrupting, not understanding nonverbal cues, and following some of the conversational roles. And then also you can have physical problems like swallowing. So common causes, be sure you guys are aware of common causes of traumatic brain injuries. And then some things that we do from a treatment standpoint is we want to make sure speech, if we can improve it, make it more clear, express their thoughts and feelings effectively, improve attention for daily tasks and activities. So a lot of times we're looking, can they be, you know, productive and safe doing things for themselves and doing their daily tasks for themselves, or do, and you know, hopefully we can get our adults returning to activities that they, you know, did for themselves before. Improving, that's a new word, improving planning and organization skills. So definitely that piece. And being sure if they do have swallow issues, obviously as SLPAs, you wouldn't be working on that, but your supervisor would. But again, that's another component that we see, that a lot of times somebody has had a traumatic brain injury and then, you know, other things start occurring. And those are some things that you as an SLPA need to be aware of. And my co-therapist, we've had some scares with TBIs. Her daughter just had a brain tumor removed. Not cancerous, she's doing great, all things considered, but you know, I was talking with my co-therapist about what are some things her daughter needs now. She's had, you know, a tumor removed. You know, she was having difficulty before, but we didn't know it was related to a brain tumor. It makes sense now. And just talking about kind of the rehab my co-therapist is looking for her daughter, because she definitely needs it. And we were talking about some of the difficulty that, you know, she's 17, that she didn't have before, and now that she does. And then, you know, my co-therapist, you know, we're talking about driving a car. Well, she's absolutely not cleared to drive a car, but trying to now regulate that with 17 who's been driving everywhere, and 17-year-old has been driving everywhere and now can't. And also someone who might have some more impulsive behaviors that they didn't have before. So just some of those changes, just even at the young age, and you know, working on her rehab and what she needs to do. So it's been great to kind of see changes from somebody, not as a therapist, but just as a good friend, and understanding it, how much improvement she's made just in very, very short time. So the rehab part is working for her. She's regaining daily living skills that, you know, she was used to doing for herself, not used to having somebody do them for her. Like picking out clothes. She was having such a hard time just picking out her clothes, and doing things like initiating going to brush her teeth, comb her hair, even like how to do her password on her phone, which we kind of joked with her. I was like, you know, I've never seen you have a problem with that. And she was talking about, you know, thank God for Face ID, because she's like, just trying to do it and motor plan it and then put it in has been a challenge for her. But yeah, we were kind of goofing. I was laughing with her because all the teenagers are so good with their phones. It's like, really, we probably should get one of the teenagers to come help her with her phone skills. I'm sure they're all better skilled than me or my co-therapist. So two types of brain injury. So closed brain injury and open. So obviously a closed head injury, this is where you hit something, but you don't have anything, you know, penetrating the skull. So concussions would essentially be like a closed brain injury. You know, you smack your head on the windshield or on the ground from bike fall, something along those lines. So helmets definitely help prevent you from a closed head injury. And then obviously an open brain injury. So anything that penetrates the skull is going to be a traumatic brain injury. So like again, we see mostly from falls, motor vehicle crashes, and definitely sometimes what we see is like kind of the broader part of the brain injured with that instead of just one part where something penetrated. You know, obviously bullet wounds are a big cause of open head injuries, and definitely like workplace accidents could definitely cause some open head injuries. So definitely we're looking at what happens biologically to the brain after the injury. So is there damage? Is there bleeding? Is there swelling? So those are key components that then can cause other issues. Then we look at changes in functioning. Do they have loss of consciousness? Are they in a coma? Do they have post-traumatic amnesia? So that's not like the other kind of, you know, amnesia you think about in the movies, but we're looking, a lot of times they don't know, they don't remember the accident that caused the injury. So we see, you know, can they not remember what happened? That's some components and things we usually address in rehab, as well as if the brain, is there permanent damage? Is there, you know, what's the prognosis of healing? What part of the brain is injured? And then what kind of those aspects are. So for instance, we know, looking from aphasia, do they have damage to the language centers? Do they have damage temporal lobe versus the frontal lobe? So we know a lot of our executive function happens here in our frontal lobe. So if there's damage to the, you know, forehead, front, definitely you can have extensive difficulties versus not as much language, but more executive function, or you're good here, but all your damage was on one of the sides of your head. Okay, what do we know about the brain and what did those parts control? So definitely looking at what's the severity. So it's obviously the amount of brain tissue that was damaged, as well as the severity of it. So a lot of times too, we look at how long were you in a coma? So if you had a brain injury and put you in a coma, how long were you in a coma? That's a big factor. And then we look at what part of the brain was injured. So what do we expect? So then we start doing assessments on that. So definitely recovery can vary for people. And I feel like the recovery, if you've had a traumatic brain injury, the recovery is a very, very long period. And that's what's awesome and complex about the brain. And it's awesome to see. So if you know, working with some of the people that I have that had a traumatic brain injury and looking at the long-term recovery is really cool. I appreciate it. I respect how awesome our brain is. So it's like I said, I don't want to say it's a fun disorder. I don't want anybody to experience a traumatic brain injury, but I do like treatment for, you know, for individuals who've had a traumatic brain injury. It's a very rewarding disorder to work with. And definitely looking at what are some of their physical functioning. So for instance, you've had a traumatic brain injury, but now you're also paraplegic. That's different versus, you know, there's a lot of different levels of recovery and where they are, not to mention emotional components, a lot of things in your life changing. So it can be very complex and multifaceted. So a lot of times we kind of start working on the physical aspects, and then we work on kind of that cognitive rehab piece. Hopefully you're getting both at the same time. That doesn't always happen. Should, but it doesn't always. So it's kind of like sometimes we got to deal with the most severe and then move down the list. And the other part too is looking at where their cognitive functions are. So sometimes we don't know where it is long term. We have to look at it, you know, 6 weeks out. Oh, hey, it's improved dramatically. So prognosis improves. And kind of we see how fast progress is for what their long-term prognosis will be. And I think too, if they have a sensory issue now that they didn't have before, definitely, especially with things like vision and hearing, those dramatically affect their participation, their ability to sustain um, participation in rehab. So those things are important. And then, like I said, other physical changes. So definitely those impact our recovery and treatment, as well as sometimes what our focus is. So there's a lot of different components with, recovery versus improvement. So obviously we hope to, you've had a dramatic brain injury as an adult, we're hoping you recover your skills that, you lost. And then sometimes we know you're never going to be back in a certain capacity or in a certain manner that you were before, but have you improved? Do you have enough compensatory strategies for some of those areas of deficits? Are you building on your strengths and kind of trying to do your best to compensate for your weaknesses? I think the biggest challenge for a person recovering from a traumatic brain injury who sustains a lot of kind of that personality and emotional changes is then how their family responds to them. So definitely, like, they can become a new person, so to speak. And sometimes there's a lot of, all of a sudden, I don't want to say dysfunction, but communication, interaction, that type of thing is very different for the family, caregivers, significant others, and it definitely impacts their participation in treatment. And what's really hard too is if, let's say, somebody had some extensive damage, we know we're not going to regain all the functions that they had lost. I think then there's a whole grieving process that families go through. A lot of times too, let's say it's a significant car accident, so they're just thankful they're alive, and then now they're alive and now they're starting to recover and they're not the same person. So it's kind of a way in a death. So that changes so many things, dynamics. Not to mention, if the person, if they were a professional in a job, their daily lives, it can impact them. So mild TBI, like I said, mild TBI is often referred to as a concussion. And some of the mild effects of a mild TBI, we're looking at, it's usually some, short-term things, working on some compensatory strategies, and then hopefully some, recovery. And children. So the biggest challenge with our adults versus children group is that children, their brains are still developing, and it is more flexible. There's a lot of more neuroplasticity. It's that fun word. That means the brain has more capacity to change. And so what we see is sometimes with the adult, we're starting to reopen those pathways or find new pathways to go through. It's kind of like, to me, I think of like that highway. Oh, this is injured, so we got a detour. So as you age, you've got more connections. And then with the younger groups, they don't have as many connections made. So sometimes there's big gaps. So like what I call, there's not, some suspension bridges in there, or the alternate path or the back way, so to speak. So that can be a challenge because a lot of times some of the skills they lost, they were still in the process of developing. So that's where some things are challenging for our young population when they experience a traumatic brain injury. So who else is at risk? So let's think about this. Males, that's, I can tell you in my house that's true for sure. Alcohol is another risk factor. So people who drink alcohol and engage in various activities or get behind a wheel or make some poor decisions under the influence definitely can cause you to be at high risk for traumatic brain injury. Age group of 15 to 25 years of age, and 1.5 million brain injuries per year. So that is extensive. So I anticipate any of you that do rehab will experience somebody who's had a traumatic brain injury. So what are some of the treatment? So the other key component that we look at, so for us, where would we provide services for these people? Definitely residential, so maybe home health, kind of that post-acute, so they don't need a like skilled nursing facility or acute care setting, but they are home, but they still need some support as they transition back at home. Looking at sometimes they need some of that neuro rehab, transitional living, the maybe long-term supported living. Hopefully, you know, that's not, we always hope they don't need something along those lines, but a lot of times that's the reality of it. Outpatient, we see these people in outpatient and clinic-based. So, and I say outpatient. So some hospitals have outpatient settings. Other therapy, neuro rehab have outpatient services. So like St. Joe's is a pretty extensive neuro rehab here in Arizona. And they have some different levels of rehab. So also looking at inpatient rehab. So inpatient, usually you're still in the hospital. For instance, I was at this Drake Rehab Hospital. So everybody there, they weren't there for some illness, or they were there from a rehabilitation standpoint. So I had some people who were still in a coma or coming out of a coma. And so I was on the trach and vent floor. So they were on a trach or a vent, and then really looking at kind of as they improved, you kind of moved down the floors. So you went from, I don't know, was on the 5th floor, and then, you know, each level was a little bit less intense. So it was great if I went to what we call level 2 at the hospital, such change. So if I saw them at level 5 and then I'm covering level 2 for a variety of reasons, and it was always fun to see how much your patients change. And then looking at some of these outpatient programs. So now I think we've really moved as far as healthcare goes into the outpatient. I think there's a lot of good research that support home base being in your own community. So especially for our individuals that have a traumatic brain injury, we're trying to give them the input, give them things familiar, build those neural pathways again. And obviously still in the school, you can encounter somebody with a traumatic brain injury. I have a few right now. Obviously, you know, speaking about my co-therapist daughter, she's basically just had one. She had a, you know, massive tumor that's been removed. And looking at what does she need the school base, we're trying to still determine that. And she's making changes every day, so it's great to see how fast her progress is. The other thing I want to talk about, there's some good handouts. There's a great video that I like. So Mayo has some good descriptors, and really looking at severity too. They talk a little bit more of, you know, what do you see in children's. And the other thing that I noticed is with the kids, definitely sleep. So sleep in general, that's another key piece that is dramatically affected from a traumatic brain injury. This is true for children and you know, adults, but looking at that teenage where your system's still trying to regulate itself, it's definitely some period of change, especially with your circadian rhythm anyway, let alone having a traumatic brain injury. So I see that with the adolescents. So I've had quite a few at the high school with the traumatic brain injury. Sleep was always a huge factor, and that's one of the ways to your brain recovers. So sleeping and monitoring and making alterations and accommodations for sleeping is a key piece, because they definitely are drowsy. And the only other thing that I thought was good to point out is looking at, risk factors, males in any group, any age group, and The only other thing too that I like, it really talks about some of the severity. So looking at the difference between a coma, vegetative state, minimally conscious state, and brain death. So this kind of highlights some of the differences when those terms are used. So coma to me is used more in a general way, where brain death is definitely different than vegetative state. So kind of be familiar with that. And then the other physical complications that occur. So there's one other thing. Now, the only other little tidbit of when we're looking at some of that brain injury piece is some of the degenerative brain diseases and how they present themselves, and looking at, there is some research and more what I would say applicable, very good statistics and research on some of this that goes on as far as brain injury, what those can maybe perpetuate for somebody. So Alzheimer's and Parkinson's being two big ones. So just being aware. A lot of times too, we work on preventing another subsequent. Like I said, that's seen it happen a few times in a acute rehab where they're working on getting their balance, walking, doing those things, and then experiencing another concussion on top of a extensive head injury is not helpful for anybody's recovery. So those are key things. So, and what's really apparent too, you have one traumatic brain injury, you definitely need to take some extra precautions to not have another. So look through that on the assignments this week. You have a reaction video and then an observation, a short quiz, and a read and review summary. So there is a little more, there's a few more assignments, but they're short. And on the read and review summary is going back to our book, chapter 8, what it is to discuss some of the evidence-based treatment for TBI. So, and the Rancho levels. So be aware of that, research that, look that up again, and be familiar with it. And that's all for tonight, really. I appreciate you. Yeah, they're in the textbook. The Rancho levels are in the textbook. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. And you guys